Welcome to Moving Conversations, a podcast for movement professionals by movement professionals. If you coach, train, or teach movement, Pilates, or fitness, then this podcast is for you. With more than 60 years of experience in fitness and Pilates, your hosts, Brian Ritchie and Nora St. John, explore the science of human movement, diving deep into the facts, myths, and common misconceptions, hoping to spark thought and conversation about how we view fitness and movement. Now, let's jump into Moving Conversations. And welcome back to Moving Conversations. I'm Brian Ritchie, joining me as always, Nora St. John. Good morning, Nora. How you doing?
I'm very well. I'm looking out the window, and apparently the whole Northern California and Pacific Northwest is going to be hit by a bomb cyclone. Like, I swear to God, they make up these really dramatic meteorological names simply so weather people have something exciting to say, which basically means it will rain. This is California. You know, rain is a thing, but it's not usually a major thing. So it will rain. Woohoo! But they'd have to call it a bomb cyclone. It sounds like somebody's going to die.
Oh, it's like around here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Around here, if it snows and we get a decent snow, because the last few years we haven't, the giddiness on the meteorologists on the news is palpable. I mean, they're just so excited that they have something to talk about that's not the norm. They get so excited. I'm like, calm down. You know, we'll get an inch or two.
Snow.
There may, now if it's a blizzard, that's a different story. But an inch or two, it's like, okay, it's going to take you longer to get home. That might be the extent of it. Walk a little more carefully, when you're outside. It's not the end of the world.
And you get weather. Like, we don't even get weather. So really, when they get crazy like that, it's just sort of funny. It's just kind of funny. Anyway, so here we are. Yes?
Here we are. Before we get started today, wanted to tell everybody, please do us a favor, hit the like and subscribe button on the platform of your choice. It really helps us out. And that way, every Tuesday morning, it's in your feed. Boom, there it is. You've got it to listen to at your leisure. Also, check us out on YouTube under Brian Ritchie. And you can see all of us live and in color, as well as if you just want to listen that way, the audio should be there as well. You can get us on Instagram at Moving Convos, as well as Moving Convos on Gmail at gmail.com is the best way to get in touch with us. Hit us up there. We get people writing to us and asking us, well, what about this? And they have specific questions, which is wonderful. I love it when people have specific questions and suggestions. We had one come in this week to talk about a certain muscle group. And I thought, I think that'll be a good one for the new year. So yeah, let's have those keep coming in. It gives us something to, talk about, something that maybe we wouldn't have, or maybe down on the list, but if it's of interest to you, hey, it's of interest to us. So that's what you can do to get in touch with us. And today we have, today's going to be an introduction session for the next 4 sessions.
Yeah.
We've decided to do low back pain. It seems to be something that you and I probably lecture about the most. I say I do, definitely. So we're going to be doing 4 sessions on this. Today's going to be kind of an introduction, and we're going to cover disc herniations and all of that. In another session, we'll do bony parts, spondylolisthesis, stenosis in another. We'll get into exercise specifics and strategies in another. So the next 4 sessions, look forward to low back pain. That doesn't sound right. Sorry. Let's not look forward to it, but
let's learn more about
low back pain. I like that better. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, Lord. Some of this started. So Brian and I, again, have been teaching low back pain, I think, since the beginning of time, more or less.
Pretty much.
Because it is so common, right? 80% or 8 out of 10 people will have low back pain at some point in their lifetime. It is the primary reason for people taking time off work, loss of economic potential for people, long-term disability. So it really has a major effect on us as humans.
Yep.
And Brian has written a fantastic book called Back Exercise, Stabilize, Mobilize, and Reduce Pain, which has been out for 4 years now.
Sometime in the pandemic. Yeah, I want to say December of 2020. It was right around Christmas time. It came out. My big debut book, and I can't go to promote it. It was kind of one of those like, really, I can't go anywhere to promote this. So it came out during the pandemic. It's done very well, and people seem to really like it. So it's something that took a long time to develop and, right and everything. But I will say this about the pandemic that was kind of nice is there were times when I had nothing better to do. So I
There
could
you
sit
go.
there and edit and write and do all of that. So gave me something to do.
Now, one of the things that I want to really bring up here, because we told my story a long, long time ago, but we really haven't told that much of Brian's story. And I just want to bring up, like, I love this book. I helped Brian just do some of the photos and, assisted with a couple of
She's
pieces
in
of
it a
it.
bunch.
Yeah, well, there you go. Old lady model. That's what we're looking for. But
I'm
one
the
of the
old
things,
man.
but one of the things that I really enjoyed in looking at the book and working with the book is it's very practical. It's
Mm.
structured very clearly. Here are the situations. Here's the conditions. Here's the exercises. Here's the progressions. So now we know not everybody's a reader, especially anymore,
Yeah.
but it really, I'd say just the material is so clear and so user friendly, either for you as a trainer or for your clients with low back pain. It's like, okay, see these pages 1 through 27. That's kind of that. This is your roadmap.
Yep.
Very practical, very adaptable, and I just really appreciate so much what Brian's done to structure this in a way that is very user friendly. So I just want to give you kudos for that.
Well,
And then, yeah,
appreciate that. Yeah. When I was approached by a publisher, Human Kinetics approached me to do this after I taught a course on low back pain at one of the conferences. Uh, you know how my lecturing style is. I like to make things very practical.
mhm,
And I don't like to dumb down, but I like to raise everybody up. I want to bring the information so that everybody in the room is on the same level and a higher level rather than talking down to the lowest person in the room. Let's bring that lowest person's knowledge up so that they really understand what's going on. And so that's kind of how I wrote this book, because I wanted to break down the most common medical conditions that we're going to see. Because how many times have we gone into a doctor's office and the doctor will throw all these big terms out there and you really don't know what they're talking about? And what happens? You go to Dr. Google, and that can be sometimes good.
careful with that one.
Not always. I mean, let's face it. It's a hit and miss on the information you're going to get on something like that. So my thought was, look, let's break this down so that anybody can understand what a disc herniation is, so that anybody can understand what stenosis is. So it's not just this term that's out there that they say, oh, okay, this is what I have. Oh, which means I need to do X, Y, and Z. I wanted to spell it out as easily as possible. And then, I mean, like you said, you and I, during the pandemic, I flew out there. It was wonderful. It was an empty airplane. I think there were 10 people on the plane. It's the best flight I've ever had. Flew out during the pandemic. It was July of that year. We did the shoot and everything. It was wonderful. We shot a lot of exercises. And if you do get the book, you'll see that they're a page a piece, which is nice. And I tell people this all the time: copy them, give them to your clients. That's what I do. I do it myself. I mean, so please feel free. I'm giving you permission. Use it. Give it to your clients that way. But I wanted to give, okay, here's 6 months of progressions. Because how many times have you gone even to a physical therapist? They give you exercises, but you don't know where to go from there. So I wanted to also say, here's first month, do these exercises. Second month, do these exercises. Third month. So at least you have 6 months of exercises to progress them to the point where hopefully they're more into general fitness. They're more into getting back to the activity that they want to do. So that was kind of my philosophy. So you're going to have that for all the different conditions.
Awesome. And one of the things that I want to point out, in case you hadn't figured that out, if you're new to moving conversations, you may not realize this, but one of the things Brian and I really focus on always is if you understand the pathology, if you understand what the problem is, mechanically, myofascially, joint
Yep.
wise, what we're trying to do is give you those tools so then you can help to figure it out yourself. You know,
Yep.
if there's a problem and there's arthritis and it's decreasing the joint space here and it's causing stress when you flex your knee, for example, then thinking about, okay, how can I decrease that by decreasing the flexion on the knee? Just
Yep.
as an example. And Brian is always very, very focused on here's what's happening and here's how we move forward with that, kind of creating critical reasoning, which is really
Yep.
what this podcast is about, is just understanding a condition and then helping you to figure out what you can do with it in a movement perspective.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you understand the why, you can
Yeah.
figure out what to do.
Yep.
And as a movement professional, I find, I mean, how many times have you and I gone to conferences and you're sitting in a class And first of all, it's an infomercial. And I apologize if this sounds like an infomercial for my book. It's not. If you've noticed, if you've ever listened to us, this is the first time I've even mentioned my book. So it's not like I'm trying to go out there and promote this a ton. But I do think it's a very valuable resource for you to have. But when you're sitting in a class and they're throwing information at you that if it is an infomercial, it's for whatever they're selling. But if it's not, they don't give you enough information necessarily for you to determine or make the decisions on what to do. So they don't give you the why behind. They might say, here are all these exercises. But if you don't know why you're doing them or who they're for or how to progress or regress them, what's the point?
And in Pilates, that happens a lot in terms of here's the exercises, here's the choreography, here's the repertoire, here's the order. And again, if you're thinking of a general fitness client, that may be a perfectly fine way to go, whether it's personal training or Pilates. Like, here's a general program that's going to roughly balance out the body in a good way. That's great. When you have a condition, you have to ideally understand enough about what's happening to modify appropriately, progress appropriately, regress appropriately, to really address that condition. And again, that's what Brian and I are always about. How do I address the person in front of me most effectively and efficiently? And that's again what we're going to focus on for the next 3 or 4 weeks, and certainly what Brian's book really focuses in on sharply.
Yeah. I hope. I hear from a lot of people who buy it and they say they love it and they use it all the time. It's not, I always say it's a great stocking stuffer because let's face it, we all know people who are have low back pain or whatnot. So around this time of year, this book actually does sell quite a few copies. And I've been on a number of podcasts, because I was on one podcast where the person it's a business podcast, but he said, your book has helped me so much. I'd love to interview you. I'm thinking, okay, great. Hope I can help more people out,
Exactly.
So we're going to dive into low back pain. We're going to, get into the nitty gritty of it. So where would you like to start?
Well, let's start with the most common low back diagnosis, which is non-specific low back pain.
Yeah.
And I kind of want to start with that because number one, like something 80% of low back diagnoses, if there is one, is non-specific low back pain. Now, as a movement professional, this tells me nothing. Right? Because just to take this through the usual process of a client ending up at your studio or your gym, very often somebody goes into a doctor, they've got low back pain. The doctor, usually their first instinct, unless there's massive nerve symptoms or muscle loss or something like that, like there's massive symptoms, they're going to say, okay, I'm not really sure what's going on. You've got low back pain. We're going to call it non-specific low back pain. And we're not necessarily going to do a lot more exploration to explore whether it is a joint issue or a bony issue or a disc issue, right? They're just going to say you've got low back pain. Okay. So when I think about that, and I actually use this as okay, that means it's my job as a movement professional to figure out what they're doing that may be causing that low back pain. Is it postural? Is it habit? Is it their daily activities? Is it their sports activities? Is it how they sleep? Is it how they drive? Is it how they lift up their child? Like, I feel like when I'm given that diagnosis, it really doesn't tell me anything. What it tells me is I've got to be the detective to understand what's happening in that body as best I can and try to figure out why the stresses are ending up in the low back.
Now, last week we talked about sciatic pain. Generalized low back pain is very similar. It's not a specific diagnosis. It's a generalized diagnosis.
It's a symptom. I would say it's a symptom. It's not even a diagnosis. Yeah.
And what I find interesting with low back pain is this. Let's say you do have generalized low back pain, but you do get an MRI. Your MRI may show things that have nothing to do with the symptoms that you're feeling for low back pain at this time. So you may have musculoskeletal pain. You may have more of a muscle spasm, or you've injured the muscle in some way, pulled a muscle, however you want to define that. You may still have stenosis or, another issue with your spine that may or may not be even related to this, which is a lot of times why the doctor will try to do the most minimal minimally invasive, diagnosis first, which is often an anti-inflammatory, and
Yep.
maybe if you need it, physical therapy,
Yep.
because a lot of times with muscle issues, you take a anti-inflammatory or a muscle relaxant for a period of time, couple of weeks, take as needed sort of thing. Things calm down, things feel better. You're doing pretty well after a short period of time. Usually it'll clear up within about a month with that course or that remedy of, treatment options.
So with that in mind, thinking about again non-specific low back pain. Let me articulate myself. Thinking about when your client comes in, I'm going to use a couple of case studies here. Right, a client comes in. I
Yep.
can think about many clients. I'm sure Brian can too. I'm sure you can as well. That come in and they say, "Oh yeah, I've got low back pain." So one of the first things that I need to do, again, whether they have a diagnosis or not, is what I actually have to do is figure out what works for them and what doesn't work for them, what causes more symptoms, what decreases their symptoms,
Mm-hmm.
what activities they can do easily, what activities are potentially compromised.
Yep.
And so, a lot of times it's as simple as, so tell me, when do you get the pain? For example, I think of one client in particular, it's worse in the morning. They get up, they kind of crawl out of bed, they're really stiff. Their back doesn't feel great, but it's just general low back. It doesn't, not going into the hips. There's no nerve symptoms, just like the back is just really achy and sore. They take a shower, they move around. By the time they've had their first cup of coffee, 15, 20, half an hour later, they feel much better.
Yep.
So that lets me know that movement was helpful. Okay. So again, at night, you're generally not doing much, you're lying down, you're not moving. And that will often increase pain in situations like arthritis or things where lack of mobility is a problem.
Yep.
Yeah. So in that case, I say, okay, well, it sounds like movement is helpful. So let's kind of just get you generally gently moving the whole body, really, but also specifically the spine, and see what our next step is. What of the various movements of the spine, lateral flexion, extension, rotation, are helpful or not helpful for you?
Mm-hmm. That's something that I really want to reiterate is when you first talk with the client, the first two questions that I always ask, what makes it feel bad?
Mhm.
What makes it feel worse? Is there anything? Oh, tying my shoe. Okay. So bending over makes it feel worse. Oh my gosh. Yes. Sitting makes it feel worse. Okay. Standing too long makes it worse. Okay. And I jot that down. Second question is there anything that makes it feel better? Lying down. Okay. What leg position? Are your legs up? Are you on your side, on your
Yeah.
belly, whatever it is? What makes it feel better? Oh, when I sit, oh, the pain just goes away. Okay. Or when I do stretching, it goes away. When I do release work with a foam roll, whatever it is, it gives me an indication. Okay. Here's what makes it feel good. Here's what makes it feel bad. And just that alone gives me an understanding of, okay, I know what direction I need to head into because I know what to avoid and I know what is going to potentially feel better for them.
Yeah. The history is critical of that. And again, the diagnosis is, in my experience, always, even if it's non-specific, if it's not non-specific low back pain, it's something else with a specific, like they've got stenosis here or there, or they've got something else. The key thing there is that's great, good information. What is your experience? What are your symptoms? Because I'm just thinking of one of the instructors I was just working with who came in and said, yeah, I've got a disc problem in L4-5. And I said, great. And generally with a disc issue, again, these are all general things, extension makes it feel better. We're going through a number of different exercises over this training we were just doing, and he never felt better in extension. He always felt better with flexion.
Yep.
I'm like, okay, so maybe there's something else going on aside from just a disc issue, or wherever that disc is causing irritation, it feels better when he's flexed. So
Yep.
that was like, okay, I'm gonna look at the diagnosis, it's information, but I really am gonna look at that client and go, what is your experience? And sometimes, I find it takes a while. I think Brian would agree with this. Sometimes it takes 2, 3, 4 sessions to really tease out, or more, but to really
Mm-hmm.
tease out what really does make it feel better, what really doesn't make it feel better.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And you'll know that when you put them into certain positions. If they're
Mm.
lying down, do they naturally flatten their back in order to get relief? Oh, okay. That tells me they may like to be more in a posterior tilt sort of position. That flexion feels better. Something else to think about. that goes along with this is these can change as they get better or worse.
Yeah.
Because I've had clients with multiple conditions, as we all have. The MRI shows like 3, 4 different things, and you're looking at it and you're thinking, okay, you can chase one or the other. But
Yeah.
again, if you have two contradicting diagnoses, like a disc issue and a bone issue, one wants flexion and one wants extension, and you're looking at the two and you're thinking, well, what do I do?
Right.
And guess what? Based on that day of the week
Yeah.
and the hour and the minute and whatever it is in front of you, they could actually be having symptoms from one or the other. And I'm going to put myself in this category because when I was 23, 24, I herniated 2 discs in my back. I was doing something very stupid, lifting something way too heavy, and I felt it go, hurt. I've had back issues ever since. Well, guess what? I'm also a little older now. So I also have arthritis. I've got facet joint syndrome in some of my joints. So guess what? If the discs are angry, if I do something that actually causes the disc material to shift out a little bit, extension makes me feel better. And I can really feel that. I can go into those McKenzie type exercises and say, okay, yep, that feels so much better. Most of the time, though, flexion actually feels better because that facet joint isn't irritated, causing the muscles around it to be irritated. So I prefer flexion in general. So it's one of those things that depending on the day of the week and depending on what's going on and how my body feels. Now, again, I'm a movement professional. I kind of know my body. I'm like, oh, okay, this is what it feels like. I do this, 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 and this. I feel better. Great. I have this going on. I do this, this, and this. I feel better. With your client, you've got to suss that out. You've got to begin to pull that information from them. And sometimes you'll have them do an exercise and they'll do it and they'll say, wow, after I left last time, whatever we did made it feel a lot better. Well, go back in my notes. We were aiming in this direction. Cool. Let's continue to go in that direction and see if we can get a little better. And other times you're going in that direction. They say, yeah, for whatever reason, it got irritated. There's something. And I say, oh, okay. Maybe we pull back a little bit. So you just have to gauge with that client in front of you, because multiple conditions can lead to different types of, options for you and what you can do and what's going to feel better that day.
So thinking about that, right, as a movement professional, that's a lot of your job is to, again, to become a body detective. And one of the key things that I think of with every low back client, we were talking to it and talking around it, but just to bring it right up into focus is what is the position of their pelvis and their lower back that gives them the most relief? That's not what, and I want to be really clear, that is not one lock and load position. I'm going to stay here for the rest of my life. Although sometimes clients will often, and Pilates instructors will often, and personal trainers will often interpret it that way. But it's more like, okay, so where, what is the best position that I can work in that gives me the least trouble? How do I strengthen in that position? Oftentimes for pain relief. So I'm going to really think about, if I got somebody in acute pain, how do I help them manage their position, both with me and in the rest of their life, so I can minimize the discomfort that they're feeling. And then hopefully over time, that will improve and we can start to expand their potential. We can expand their movement capabilities. We can expand their spinal mobility, perhaps. We can increase their strengthening. But first, every back client, I've got to really focus on pain control, discomfort control, getting rid of whatever symptoms they're having that are causing them pain or discomfort.
Yeah. That's super important, is just to figure out what positioning works best for them. Because once you found that out, that opens up a world of exercises to you.
Yeah.
And it doesn't eliminate necessarily all the exercises that you can't do. You just have to say, oh, okay, they need to be in flexion or they need to be in extension or they need to be in neutral, whatever it is. Well, you can still do your marching, your toe taps. You can still do all the reformer work. You just have to bias them properly.
Right. I think about one client these days who doesn't have a lot of back issues, but her back hurts with extension, and she's a bit anteriorly tilted. She used to be quite lordotic, and she's kind of worked through that. So she's a Pilates instructor, and she's done a lot of Pilates work that has decreased her lordosis, increased her ability to flex her lumbar spine. Still, she doesn't have much flexion there at all. It's pretty
Ah,
flat to extended. And so when she goes into a swan of any kind or a back extension on the mat or anything else, she'll feel that kind of crunchy discomfort in the low back. And one of the things that, I work with her, and again, it's not that she has a lot of low back pain, but this doesn't work for her. And a lot of it is like, okay, you have limited hip extension. You have a limited lumbar, you have some lumbar extension, but if she's, for example, takes a leg lift, prone leg lift, she'll feel that crunchiness in her low back because she doesn't have the hip extension, which means the low back is going to take the extension, and that causes compression of the joints in the back of her spine. So in her case, it's like, all right, let's find your extension.
mhm.
In her case, it's like she can lift that leg to just about level with her hips. If she goes even much past what I would call neutral in terms of hip extension, or leg right below the pelvis, she'll get that discomfort. So we're kind of working on just increasing that range through increasing range of motion in the front of the hips, and then just finding where the placement is that can allow her to get a little more range without pain. And
And
I
that's where
find,
being the
yeah,
body detective is so important,
yeah,
and not to only look at the low back,
hmm, right,
but to
right,
really look at what's surrounding it, because you just said it yourself. When she goes into extension, she was basically dumping into her low back, increasing that lordotic curve a lot
yeah, and
and
compressing,
compressing. It was too
yeah,
sharp.
yep,
So doing any type of back extension immediately went right there. That was the
mhm,
focus because everything else was too tight. We see this with tight thoracic. If someone's really
yes,
rounded, they're going to dump into the low back. If they have tight hip flexors, if they can't get good hip extension, they
yep.
dump into their lumbar spine. So these are all things that, look, they may be able to go into normal, what we would consider normal spinal extension without pain. However, these other limiting factors increase the amount of compression in their lumbar spine,
Mhm.
thus leading to pain. So instead of just keeping them forever not going into extension, there are other things we need to work on. Like you said, work on your hip extension, work on lengthening the hip flexors, work on thoracic extension, work on, thoracic rotation, the above and below areas, because those can mean so much for someone who does have those type of issues with their low back. You need to look elsewhere than just the area that's, causing the pain.
A classic example for this, and I think this for me relates a lot to my more athletic clientele, and I'm sure you've seen this too, where like I'm thinking about one younger kid, about a 17-year-old, 18-year-old boy who was a football player in high school, and his lats were so tight that when he lifted his arms up just barely over his shoulders, he would go into lumbar extension.
Yeah.
And like leaning, like let's say if he was side lying, we're going to do a pinwheel exercise, which is lying on your side and taking an arm circle, basically. And as soon as his arm went up at all, his whole waist lifted up because there wasn't enough length for him between where his lat attached onto his arm through the thoracolumbar fascia into the low back. Like as soon as he lifted his arm up, his low back went into extension
Mhm.
because that whole thoracolumbar fascia and that whole lat was so tight. And that was the first time I'd seen that. It's like, oh, this isn't about the low back. This is about this tightness through the upper body. So
Mhm.
always again, I just wanted to reiterate this. We always look at the bottom. I always look at hips and hamstrings and hip flexors. But this was the first one that really pointed out, oh, it can come from the upper body as well.
Yep.
And more of my clients than I can think about will just do a lat stretch. Like a classic one for me is hanging off the side of the trap table or hanging on the Coraline bars and just letting the back release, or on the trap table or the tower, taking the push through bar and reaching it up overhead and either just pushing it or having the instructor gently pull that and like, oh, my back feels so, right? Because
Mhm.
that's that other piece that can really be problematic for low back pain.
Yeah. I find that when looking at above, like you said, below we often will look at,
Yeah.
but looking above, for me, it's the thoracic. Now, I've had thoracic issues many, many years from my childhood and whatnot. So it's an area that I've done a lot of research in and been looking at. But what I've noticed is the more that we sit, the more that we spend time at this computer, I'm staring at a screen right now, the more that we're here, we're not moving.
Yeah.
I'm noticing my clients' ribs are getting very fixated. They're
Yep.
almost freezing in place. And
Hmm.
if you have them take a deep breath, what happens? The rib cage goes up, it doesn't go out. And
Yep.
their belly goes out, but their ribs don't really move. You
Mhm.
ask them to do an overhead movement, and even if their lats are long enough, what begins happening is you see that rib shift. You see it
Yeah, come
begin to
forward.
arch.
Yep, and
Yes,
extend in the thoracic. Yep.
exactly. And you can almost put your fingers right under their rib cage, because it goes up so much. And what I notice in this, and you can see this from the side, do this with your clients as a simple assessment, is in a supine position, lying on their back, have them take their arms over their head,
Hmm.
and then look at where their low back arches.
Hmm.
Does it arch what we would call almost a mid back arch? Do their ribs really become almost the focal point
Yep, and
that's
pop
where
forward.
they pop forward, and you look
Mhm.
and you see the lever almost being right there at the thoracic lumbar junction, rather than everything moving up and seeing an elongation of the spine. You will see more of a really sharp teeter totter right there at the TL junction. So, and it's simple to see.
Yeah.
It's very apparent.
And one thing that I want to bring up here, because it is a thing in Pilates often, um, when you see that rib pop, right, that front of the ribs kind of popping forward when somebody lifts their arms up or their arms go up overhead. In Pilates, there's a lot of moments where that happens for various
Mhm.
different choreographic reasons. And what the cue that's been given for a long time is pull your ribs down, pull your ribs down, pull your ribs down. And I just want to encourage you to think about this a little bit differently. It's often not that the ribs need to go back, it's that the back needs to loosen up.
Yeah,
So, and just bringing the ribs down often just compresses the whole thing. So the abdominals pull in, they compress the diaphragm, and the back muscles are not getting any encouragement to loosen up from that.
yep,
Yeah. So it's something that I really focus on a lot with all my teacher trainings is if you've been taught that cue of like funnel the ribs, bring the ribs down, that may be useful, but first check and see, to Brian's point, if that arm goes up and those low ribs pop up off the mat or that curve really increases, that's not necessarily because the abdominals aren't doing their job to bring the ribs
mhm,
back. Most times I find it's because the back is so tight, erector spinae, thoracolumbar fascia, the lats, the
yeah,
whole deal. That's what's bringing those ribs forward. And the solution is not pull the ribs back. The solution is open up the back through breath, through stretching out the lat, through really increasing that mobility of the whole thoracolumbar fascia. So just thinking about that from
absolutely.
that angle. Yeah.
Well, the thing that always made me sort of laugh about that is I've worked with a number of Pilates instructors, and what they'll tell people to do is bring the ribs down. Do you feel your abs working? Oh, now they're working really hard, so that the person immediately thinks that's what I need to do. And all they do is basically create more tension by
Yeah.
clamping that down. And what are you literally doing to your spine? You're causing more kyphosis sometimes.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Especially if you got your arms engaged, whether they be arms and
Yeah.
straps, whatever it is, you tend to and you're creating a moment where you increase that thoracic kyphosis rather than elongate it, which is really what we want to do. We want to create more length through our thoracic. So it's one thing to cue to keep the ribs relaxed and down. It's another thing to pull those ribs down,
Yeah.
because all that's going to do is give the wrong cue, and they're going to clamp everything down.
And just as an experiment at home, right? Think about really bringing those ribs down, which again is often the cue. Pull them in and then try to breathe.
A little tough.
Okay. Right? Because what you've just done is you've decreased the diameter of the rib cage, which
Mhm.
decreases the ability of the diaphragm to move up and down unless you really move the belly a lot. So, again, to Brian's point, where we started this whole conversation is that whole tension of the ribs that a lot of people get. And one of the things that we know happens when people age is they lose the mobility of the rib cage, and that decreases their lung
Mhm.
capacity. And if I think about my older clients, particularly this season, getting a cough, getting pneumonia, getting a cold, like if they don't have the lung capacity to really keep themselves oxygenated, they can get more lung issues, they can get sicker. None of that's good. So really keeping those lungs moving, keeping those rib cage moving is, I think, much more beneficial for everybody than squeezing them down or holding them tight. So also for that purpose.
Yes, absolutely. And it goes into, I love that you mentioned breathing, because that's something that I work with a number of clients on. And we're going to do a whole episode in the future just on breath and breathing, because it's very important. And it's something that when I first learned about fitness and exercise, it was, breathe out on exertion, in on, relaxation. And that's about all you learned. And when I started doing a little bit more, research into the rib cage and the thoracic, and realizing that it needs to move. And if it's not moving properly, you're not really breathing fully. And there are so many shallow breathers out there. And doing simple breath work with someone, having them really feel the first of all, the expansion of the rib cage, whether it be anterior, posterior, or lateral, or even elongation. By doing that, just making them aware of that and getting them to be one of their exercises where they can actually feel that, can be incredibly beneficial for them.
Right. And both myofascially, because that can again loosen up all the muscles around the rib cage, most of which attach one way or another to the pelvis or the spine. So it just calm that down. And also breathing has a direct relationship to our nervous system. So paying attention to your breath for many people will activate our parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest and digest, calms ourselves down, can decrease pain just from breathing. So that's one thing. What I want to bring up here. So we're kind of talking right now, or I would say we're talking about the sagittal plane a bit, right? Looking at hamstrings, glutes, low back, hip extension, hip flexion, how the thoracolumbar fascia comes in, how we play with the front of the body. I want to think a little bit about the lateral system too, the sides of the body. One of the things that I will always do once it's appropriate with a client with back pain is find some maybe very gentle way to do a tiny side sit-up. They may be over, like the Pilates arc is one of my favorite tools here, or a bolster or something where they're supported and they can kind of push their ribs into that as they come up into a tiny side bend. Now, I'm not talking about a full mermaid. They're not coming up onto their hips. They're just kind of pushing the ribs up and doing a tiny side bend. One of the things I find with almost all my low back clients is one side is easy and one side they actually can't do it at all. Look at you like, how do I do this on this side? So that, and oftentimes it doesn't take a lot to cue them into how to do it, but they'll find that one side is way weaker and way less just active. So, think about three-dimensional support. That's another place that I'll play with, like what's happening on the side body, particularly in the torso, but I'll then also do like side leg lifts and look at the abductors. Those are another key piece of that whole lateral system. And if they're really imbalanced or really weak on one side, that will put stress through the pelvis, stress through the spine. And that may be one other way to think about the root of their back pain.
I'm just thinking, if you look at traditional Pilates as well as traditional fitness, 75 to 80% of the exercises are sagittally based. And that's just the way that they were made, whatever. And you and I have talked for years about making things three-dimensional and really working in rotation and working in lateral, working in all the planes of motion. You need to consciously make that decision in your programming. And I find that I still watch even my staff sometimes, and I'll mention it to them and I'll say, great workout. What did you do that was lateral? They'll be like, oh, yeah. Because there's so many choices in the sagittal plane that it's easy just to tick off those boxes. It's just, I hate to say low hanging fruit, but those are the things that we're comfortable with and that we do a lot of. We need to put some conscious effort into doing lateral, even side stepping, side step ups, whatever it is. But for this, absolutely, that side sit up, incredibly important. Incredibly important. And again, I like that you said a mini one, because
I make it very small.
If they have any issues with facet joints, bony, issues or whatnot, extreme lateral flexion or a herniated disc or anything that may be another underlying condition in there, doing too great a range of motion can sometimes set things off. So starting out small is much better, in my opinion, much better, and can lead to greater results.
So thinking about that starting, and we've talked about this is kind of one of the themes that's emerging here, is starting distally. meaning not starting at the low back. I mean, yes, we
Mhm.
certainly do some there, but thinking about what's happening in the upper body, what's happening in the lower body. So thinking about that for the side body, when I talk about a mini sit up, I literally am like have something under my rib cage, whether it's an arc or a ball or a bolster, and I'm really just coming up, really using just my, I'm almost just coming my rib cage into that lateral flexion. My lumbar spine is not particularly moving in that situation. And then even with a side leg lift, especially if the pelvis is steady, all I'm trying to do is get the abductors going. So I'm working like above the problem and below the problem, and noting if there's a challenge there that may be feeding into the low back.
Mhm. A lot of people wanna do a side plank for that, and
Hmm.
I love the side plank, but let's face it, for a lot of people, going directly into a side plank, whether it be on the forearm or on the fully extended arm, can be a challenge on their feet, because that's a lot of weight being held on one limb. If you
And
think
their
of a
arm
regular and there are with
and their
I'm just saying,
shoulder.
on
Yeah,
one
yeah,
limb,
yeah, 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 yeah.
unlike a push-up where you have a connection from both sides, so there's a little bit more balance on one arm, that's all of your weight, or 60%, depending on the degree, is on one arm. So this is where, if you're going to initiate this on someone who is deconditioned, that wall plank or off of the foot bar of the reformer or off of the
Mhm.
table is
Yeah,
much better. And
yep,
I'll even do a rotating plank where they start with both hands
yep,
and turn, so
yep,
they're
and
not
then go
staying that
back.
position long.
Yeah,
Hold it, come back down, switch sides, hold it, come back down. That way, they're not holding it for too long, because what we see if they hold it too long is everything tightens up,
yep,
and that's not what we're looking for. We want elongation. We want them to be
right.
long as they're turning. We want their body to get longer, not crunched down.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. So, I mean, a side sit up or a side plank, a lot of times I'll do from a seated position.
Mm,
I mean, sort of I call the modified side plank. So maybe my forearms on the floor or my hands on the floor, and my knees are bent, my hips are on the ground, and all I do is push up and put the weight on the side of
mhm,
my bottom knee, basically. So it's a
yeah,
much smaller lever, and and again, like you said, I'll go into it and out of it, and into it and out of it, rather than into it, stay, 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 stay. I won't do that. Like I just go, okay, just touch it, come back, touch it, come back.
yep.
Yeah.
Something that I teach in a lot of my classes goes into that, and it's statues.
I love your statues. I think those are great.
Statue work works great. You can't do it by yourself, unfortunately. I've tried. Literally, if I can figure out a way, I will share it with the world, but I just haven't been able to figure it out yet. But it's for those of you watching on YouTube, you'll see I have this client usually seated to start with, hands across their chest. I stand behind them and I put gentle pressure, increasing speed side to side, forward and back, and even rotation. Well, I do that to wake up the spinal stabilizing muscles. That's my
Yep.
primary goal for that, because I want to get, again, we were talking distal. Now that is actually talking very proximal. We're talking about the muscles that align the spine.
Hmm.
But that's one way to do a statue, where you're working on speed and not pressure. So you're only putting like half a pound of pressure in any direction and you see the person wobble around. That's one way to do it. The other way is, think about it as an isometric contraction, because I can stand behind them with their arms here and just push on one shoulder. And I can gauge how strong they are, because as I'm pushing, as soon as I start to see some movement, I keep my pressure right there. So I stay within their strength level, and I'll hold it for up to 5 seconds and then release. And I can do the other side. So that's another way to do a statue, where you can add that lateral flexion, but now I can actually gauge it a little bit, because if they are fragile, which, let's face it, people who come to us with low back pain, some of them are too fragile to do something else like this.
Hmm.
This is an easy way for me to just have them sit comfortably. And even if their back is leaning back against a chair,
Yeah.
I could still push into them, and those muscles still have to begin firing. A
Yeah.
lot like if you're going around the turn in a car,
You'll
you're going around a
automatically
sharp turn.
adjust.
Your body has to, your QL, your obliques have to engage,
Yep.
or else you hit the window. If you're making a right hand turn, that's what's going to happen. So it's the same thing. And I can basically gauge how hard I'm pushing into them. And that's a great way to do it. And again, I start pushing in for, at 0 pounds, push, 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 push. Once I find that where they start to move a little, they're almost about to move, hold 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, then slowly decrease. I don't yank it away because the muscle might, jump. I slowly ease away, and then I'll do the other side. And that way it just begins waking up those muscles, because a lot of times these muscles have gone to sleep.
Yes.
Even though they're in spasm, they don't
Yeah.
know what their job is. So instead of doing that's my job, like a union worker, I'm going to do that. No, my job is to stand here and look in the hole, or my job is to sit here and press this button. No, no, no. They're like the person at the first day of, working around the office. They want to do everybody's job. They're trying to help out with everything, but they don't know what they're doing. So we have to re-educate these muscles. We have to say, hey, look, this is your job. This is all I want you to do. You don't have to do anything else. And when you do that over time, the muscle's like, oh, that's it? I can do that. And then you can begin strengthening.
I love that. So we've taken this from looking peripherally, looking at how the rest of the body's influence on low back, to really starting to address the low back. And I want to bring up 2 things about the statue work. So when Brian is behind them and he's pushing in unexpected places, so the body has to reflexively respond. Yes. A lot of times, again, this is all based on low back theory. A lot of times what I think we're trying to do is regain the reflexes that automatically right and support the spine, regardless of where those forces are coming into it. Right? So that's a really, really nice way to do that. And then I like this kind of isometric thing. Isometrics, we know, maybe you don't, but just a reminder, if you don't know, isometrics are a great way to wake up a muscle, for one thing, for sure, to activate it. They also will strengthen the muscle, but really just in that tiny range of motion, or within a few degrees of however
20 degrees at the most. Yeah.
Right. So just a small range of motion. But again, like, how do I wake that up? How do I get those erector spinae to fire? How do I get those lateral stabilizers to fire? How do we get those abdominals to fire? Because to Brian's point, very, very often with any kind of low back pain, especially if there's inflammation in the muscles or the joints or the discs, inflammation will decrease the activation of the muscles in that area generally. Yep. And then you've got a situation, you've got pain, you've got deactivation of the muscular support, and then you've got more pain because you don't have the muscular support to do it. So I love that. And so Brian's starting to get us into that, like, how do you strengthen, how do you go into the direction of regaining that support right around the spine? So,
and something to think about too with that I just want to add one more thing. If you think about taking them from a supine position or a prone position or a quadruped position and put them into a seated position or standing position, their brain freaks out. And when I say that, I mean, you can get them activated in a supine or a prone position pretty easily. A lot of times I find when I get them into an upright position, their brain is unsure because gravity's now pulling from a different way. And they're not sure what to do with the rest of themselves. We've also changed the amount of points of contact and the way the points of contact proprioceptively feel on the body, because now either they feel their butt in the chair or they feel their feet on the ground. So what I like to do is get them into that neutral spine position seated in a chair, because guess what? If I'm going to have them do a rowing exercise, they're going to be pulled forward, but I need to make sure that they can maintain that neutral spine with a distal weight pulling at them. Or if I have them doing a one-arm press or whatever I'm having them do, they have to be able to maintain that neutral spine. So doing an isometric in a neutral position begins to build that proprioceptive feel of here's where I should be during the exercise, and creating that strength, even though it's a small range of motion or a small limited band that you're actually strengthening. It's still a good band that needs to be strengthened, because we need endurance wise to strengthen that in order to accommodate the exercises that will come in the future.
Got it.
So just something else to think about.
Yeah, no, I love it. So we've gone through assessments. We've gone through asking a lot of questions.
Yep.
We've gone through how do you sort of start to wake up the core. And it's funny because we've talked around this concept of, dynamic limb pelvic control or core stability, or however you want to talk about that. Oftentimes that is the key thing we're working on, is trying to develop that deep support for the low back. So going into that piece, and more on this as we go into the different conditions. But a lot of times, just to refresh your memory, or maybe you don't know this, where the spine is has a direct impact on how the muscles are firing or not firing. So, and also how much support there is for the joints. So we're talking about a neutral lumbopelvic position. That's something that, everybody talks about. PTs talk about, Pilates teachers talk about it. I'm assuming personal trainers talk
Oh
about
yeah.
it as well. Right. So what does that mean? A couple ways to think about that. One is it means that the spine is, again, the vertebrae are relatively centered on each other. So they're not too flexed or not too extended. They're kind of in an appropriate relationship to each other. And that's not a set place. That is a area. That's like a zone. Also to think about if somebody goes into extension, like a deep swan, the joints are stabilizing the spine, right? They come to the end range of their joints as far as they can go. If somebody goes into flexion, especially a deep flexion, they've stabilized the spine by going to the end range of the joints. But the deal with training neutral is we're actually trying to create support, not at the end ranges.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's just, a way to think about neutral. It's like, how do I support it when I'm sitting, when I'm standing, when I'm walking? When you're not at the end range, you're not fully flexed, not fully extended, you're just kind of neutral. That's where we want to really gain the support.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. And when you're thinking about creating that dynamic lumbopelvic control, and I love that you use control rather than stability. And we've talked about this in the past. So look in the archives, you'll see we went into a lot more detail on lumbopelvic control, especially when we talked about pelvic bias in the past, is trying to figure out, first of all, what position they feel comfortable in, train them in that position by getting them to move one limb, either arm or leg. You can have them do marching. You can have them lift an arm overhead, but trying to focus on maintaining that lumbopelvic control without really clamping down.
Yeah.
Just trying to maintain where that neutral zone is for their spine. I love doing knee fallouts where they're on their back, knees bent to 90 on the ground, feet on the ground, and just let their knee fall out from one side to the other while not rotating the spine. It's a great way, again, to keep that, because marching against sagittal plane, I want to go beyond that. So by doing some hip rotation as well, that can begin to train where it is in space. Oh yeah, my hip, every time my hip moves, my spine doesn't have to join it. Okay. So working on a little hip dissociation there.
Yeah.
So by working in those zones and really trying to train the spine in that zone, which is a lot of what Pilates does, which is fantastic. And I think personal training, fitness does some of, but I think Pilates does it way better. I think that's so important, especially for someone in low back pain, because that's the person that needs to know where their body is in space. That's the person who needs to know what neutral is for their body. It's not everybody's not the same. And we're going to go into that more detail when we get into our conditions, but finding what's safe for them, train them there, and really get them to be aware of where their body is and how to maintain that.
And one of the things that there was a big meta-analysis, a big study that was done on all kinds of physical training methods and which ones were most effective for low back pain. And Pilates was right up there with, I think it was the second most successful with low back pain, first or second out of about 11 different modalities. This is like a 20,000 person meta-analysis. So a lot of studies were put together for this. And I would say that a lot of the reason is because, let's say you're on the reformer. Now, this presumes you're taking, I'm going to say this, more of a contemporary approach to the lumbopelvic position. So you're finding a relatively neutral lumbopelvic position for that client, whatever that is, and you're training it with footwork. So with the knees and hips bending and straightening, with feet in straps, so that big lever, with even a curl up or supine arm work or prone work. Like you're training that in many different body positions and against challenges from different limbs, from the legs, from the upper body, even from the upper part of the spine. And I feel like that is really where, if you start to get that sense of, oh, I've got to support this way for this movement, this way for this movement, this way for this movement, that starts to translate into a deeper understanding of not just a position, but how do I maintain that against different challenges from the rest of the body?
Yeah.
And I think for me, that's a lot of Pilates magic in terms of low back pain, is exactly that.
Absolutely. And for years, I've been doing similar things just by loading in a standing position, one arm, but maintaining that neutral spine and doing it with every different type of variety, whether it be bands, cables, the reformer, springs, whatever you have, I say to use. So there's so many different variables to that. And again, on episode 4, we're going to go more into exercise strategies. We gave you some here. So you already have some things to work on for the next 4 weeks, which may turn into 5 because we've got a guest coming up. I'm just letting you guys know. So the month of December is going to be sort of low back month, but I think the first week of January, we may get in, maybe the one where we're going to talk about the actual exercise strategies. But yeah, we're going to give you very specific things that you can do to help create that awareness, to create spinal stability, to create spinal and lumbopelvic control for those clients. So we'll be getting into a lot of that down the road.
Down the road.
Yeah.
So should we wrap this one, Brian? Is this a wrap?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. We did a lot. So let's do just a quick review. You know, ask the questions. What makes you feel good? What makes you feel bad?
Yep.
Figure out what position works best for the client in front of you.
And that can take some time. So
can take some time.
And it may a moment.
And it may change a little bit.
Yep.
Don't get hung up on, well, yours is that, hey, may change. And if it does, fine, roll with it. That's what we do.
Listen to your client, right? If something changes, just listen for that change and then, accommodate appropriately.
Absolutely. And then begin to train the body in the position that feels most comfortable and best for them. Begin to build strength. You can start distally or start very proximal with lumbopelvic control, dynamic lumbopelvic control, getting more dynamic, and then also make sure you're working distally as well, because by doing lower body, by doing upper body, believe it or not, it's going to transfer into the spine as well and begin to help train that. So these are just a few things. Also focus on awareness. I think next week we're probably going to go into a little bit more of awareness because we're going to talk more about pelvic bias. So we'll get more into that. Does that sound good?
I think that does it. I think that sounds pretty good. So hopefully that made some sense to you guys. And again, thank you, Brian, for pioneering this, giving us some good structure to go forward with. And remember, back exercise, stabilize, mobilize, and reduce pain. If you need a good Christmas present or a post-Christmas present, depending on when you hear this.
Amazon is actually the best place to get it. It's cheaper it's about what I pay for it to even buy it for myself. So I tell people, go there, buy it. You can also get the e-version and then just sort of copy and paste on your screen if you want to use the images for clients. Okay. I'm giving you permission for allowing your clients to use these things. So please feel free. So again, if you like what you heard today, hit the like and subscribe button. We really appreciate it. Yep. You can also please leave us some comments. The more comments we get, the better it is. The higher up it jumps in the algorithm, the more people will see this. We really appreciate it. And also it might share this with some of your friends, colleagues, people like that, so that the more people that hear about this, hey, hopefully we can touch more clients out there and get people not only in better shape, but reduce their pain a little bit. movingconvos@gmail.com is the best way to get in touch with us. Check out our Instagram at Moving Convos. And for Nora St. John, I'm Brian Ritchie. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, guys.